The silk was too thin, and Meera was too cold, and none of this was supposed to be her life. She stood in the wings of the great hall, watching the other dancers take their positions. They moved with practiced grace, their bodies draped in gossamer fabric designed to reveal more than it concealed. Some of them had been doing this for years. Some of them had chosen it. Meera had been sold to the entertainment troupe 6 months ago, when her father's debts finally caught up with him. 22 years of being a merchant's daughter, of learning to read and write and balance ledgers, and in the end, she'd been worth exactly 300 gold pieces, enough to clear his accounts, not enough to clear her conscience of the hatred she felt every time she thought of him. "You're up next." The troop master's hand closed around her arm, fingers digging into flesh. "And smile this time. The Lycan king is watching, and he doesn't pay for sad faces." The Lycan king. Meera had heard the stories. 400 years old, ruthless in battle, had executed his own brother for treason, the kind of monster that lesser monsters told stories about to frighten their children. And tonight, she was supposed to dance for him. "I don't know the choreography well enough," she said. "I've only been training for—" "You'll learn fast." The troop master shoved her toward the curtain. "Or you'll learn what happens to girls who disappoint important clients." She stumbled into the light. The great hall was vast and glittering, filled with nobles in silk and velvet, their laughter sharp as broken glass. Torches blazed from iron sconces. Music swelled from somewhere she couldn't see. Pipes and drums, and the mournful cry of strings. And at the far end of the room, on a throne of black stone, sat the Lycan king. He was enormous. That was the first thing she noticed. Broad shoulders, powerful frame, the kind of presence that made the air itself feel heavy. His hair was dark, threaded with silver at the temples. His face hard and angular and utterly unreadable. But his eyes, those amber eyes, were fixed on her. Meera's feet carried her forward without her permission. The other dancers had already begun their routine, weaving between each other in patterns she barely knew. She tried to follow, tried to remember the steps, tried to ignore the weight of that golden gaze tracking her every movement. She was failing. She could feel it in the way the other dancers shot her irritated glances, in the way she was always half a beat behind, in the way her body refused to bend into the provocative shapes she'd been taught. She wasn't made for this. Wasn't made to be looked at, desired, consumed. She was made for ledgers and letters and the quiet satisfaction of numbers that balanced. Not for silk and skin and the hungry eyes of powerful men. The music shifted. The dancers around her sank to the floor in a coordinated wave, but Meera didn't know this part. She stood frozen, exposed, the only upright figure in a sea of prostrate bodies. The laughter started immediately, nobles pointing, whispering, delighting in her humiliation. Clumsy thing. Can't even follow a simple routine? The troop master should be whipped for sending such inferior merchandise. Meera's face burned. She wanted to run, to hide, to sink into the floor and disappear forever. But before she could move, a voice cut through the noise. "Enough." The laughter died. The whispers stopped. Every head turned toward the throne where the Lycan king was rising to his feet. He descended the dais with slow, deliberate steps. The crowd parted before him like water before a ship's prow. His amber eyes never left Meera's face, never flickered to the other dancers still prostrate on the floor. He stopped directly in front of her. Close enough that she could smell him, pine and wood smoke, and something wild that made her pulse jump. "What's your name?" His voice was deep, not unkind, but absolute. Meera, Your Majesty. Meera. He said it like he was tasting it, testing how it felt on his tongue. You're not a dancer. It wasn't a question. She answered anyway. No, Your Majesty. I'm new. I haven't learned. I don't care what you haven't learned. He took another step closer, and Meera had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. I care about why a woman who moves like a scholar is dressed like a courtesan. Something flickered in her chest. Surprise, confusion, the strange, disorienting sensation of being seen. I was sold, she heard herself say. 6 months ago. My father's debts. The king's jaw tightened. Sold? To the entertainment troupe. They've been training me to... She stopped, swallowed. To entertain. Silence stretched between them. The hall was utterly still, every noble holding their breath, every dancer frozen in place. Meera could feel their eyes on her, could feel the weight of their judgment and curiosity and fear. But the king wasn't looking at them. He was looking at her. Only at her. "And do you want to entertain?" he asked. The question caught her off guard. No one had asked what she wanted in 6 months. Possibly longer. Possibly ever. No, she whispered. Something shifted in his expression. Something hot and fierce and barely contained. Good. He turned to face the hall, his voice ringing out like a command. This woman is leaving with me. The troopmaster surged forward, his face pale with panic. Your Majesty, she's contracted to us. The debt transfer was legal and binding. You can't simply... I'm the king. The words were calm, deadly. I can do whatever I want. He pulled a purse from his belt and threw it at the troopmaster's feet. There's 5,000 gold. More than enough to cover her contract and compensate for your inconvenience. 5,000? The troopmaster's eyes went wide. Your Majesty, that's far too much. She's not worth... She's worth more than your entire operation. The king's voice dropped to a growl. Pick up the gold and leave my sight before I decide to investigate how many of your dancers were sold against their will. The troopmaster scrambled for the purse and fled. Meera stood frozen, her mind reeling. This didn't make sense. Powerful men didn't buy dancers to set them free. They didn't look at clumsy, untrained women and see something worth 5,000 gold. They didn't. You're shaking. The king's voice was softer now, meant only for her. Are you cold? I don't understand, she said. Why would you? Because you're mine. He said it simply, without hesitation. I knew it the moment you walked into this hall. My wolf has been howling your name since you stepped into the light. Your wolf! She stared at him. You mean... You're my mate, Meera. His hand came up, hovering near her face, but not quite touching. The one I've been waiting 400 years to find. She should run, should scream, should do anything except stand here staring at this ancient predator who was claiming her as his own. But his eyes held nothing but warmth. His voice held nothing but truth. And somewhere deep inside her, in a place she'd forgotten existed, something stirred in recognition. I don't know you, she whispered. No. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. But you will. He shrugged off his cloak, heavy black velvet, warm from his body, and draped it around her shoulders. The silk of her costume vanished beneath its folds, and for the first time in 6 months, Meera didn't feel exposed. Come, the Lycan king said, offering her his hand. Let me take you somewhere safe. She looked at his outstretched palm, at the throne behind him, at the sea of nobles who were staring at her like she'd grown a second head. She should refuse, should demand answers, should remember that powerful men always wanted something in return. But she was so tired of being cold, so tired of being owned, so tired of belonging to people who saw her as nothing more than a body to be used. She took his hand and let the monster lead her out of the light. The monster, it turned out, had a name. Kaelin, he said, as he led her through corridors she'd never seen. Real corridors, with tapestries on the walls and carpets underfoot, not the back passages where entertainers were shuffled like livestock. When we're alone, you'll call me Kaelin. I don't think we should be alone. Meera clutched his cloak tighter around her shoulders, hyper-aware of the thin silk beneath it. I don't think any of this should be happening. And yet here we are. He glanced back at her, amber eyes unreadable. Do you want me to take you back? Return you to the troop master? The question stopped her cold. She stood in the middle of the corridor, heart pounding, while the Lycan king, Kaelin, waited with inhuman patience. You would do that? She asked. If I asked? I would hate it. His voice was rough, honest. It would feel like tearing out my own heart. But yes, if you told me you wanted to go back, I would take you myself. Why? Because forcing you to stay would make me no better than the men who sold you. He turned to face her fully, his massive frame blocking the torchlight. I've waited 400 years for my mate. I can wait longer, if that's what you need. I can court you properly, give you time to know me, let you choose this freely. What I cannot do, what I will not do, is cage you. Meera stared at him. In 6 months with the troop, she'd learned exactly what powerful men wanted from women like her. They wanted compliance, submission, bodies that bent to their will without question or complaint. They didn't want choice. They certainly didn't offer it. I don't understand you, she said. I know. Something softened in his expression. Give it time. He resumed walking, and after a moment, she followed. The chambers he led her to were larger than the entire dormitory where the dancers slept. A 4-poster bed dominated one wall, draped in deep blue velvet. A fire crackled in an enormous hearth. There were chairs, a writing desk, a wardrobe, and she noticed with a pang that surprised her, an entire shelf of books. These are yours, Kaelin said, remaining in the doorway. No one enters without your permission. I've assigned guards to this corridor. They answer to you, not to me. If you want something, ask. If you need something, demand. If anyone makes you uncomfortable, tell me and I'll handle it. And what do you expect in return? The question came out sharper than she intended. Kaelin's jaw tightened, but he didn't look away. Nothing, he said. I expect nothing. I hope for many things. Your trust, your affection, eventually your love. But I don't expect them. They have to be earned. Men don't give women rooms like this without expecting something. I'm not a man. His amber eyes glinted. I'm a wolf, and wolves don't buy their mates. They prove themselves worthy of them. He left before she could respond, closing the door softly behind him. Meera stood in the center of her impossible new chambers, wrapped in a king's cloak, trying to make sense of a world that had shifted beneath her feet. She didn't sleep that night. Couldn't sleep. Instead, she explored the room, running her fingers over the velvet curtains, testing the softness of the mattress, pulling books from the shelf, and marveling at the fact that she was allowed to touch them. The troop master hadn't let her read. Reading was a distraction, he'd said. Dancers didn't need books. They needed flexible spines and empty heads and the ability to make men feel powerful. But these books, histories and poetry, and even a treatise on economics, they were here, in her room, for her. She was still reading when the knock came at dawn. "Come in," she said without thinking, then tensed when the door opened. But it wasn't Kaelin. It was a woman, middle-aged, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense expression, carrying a tray laden with food. "I'm Helene," the woman said, setting the tray on a small table. "His Majesty asked me to attend to you. Whatever you need, I'm here to provide it." "Whatever I need." "Clothes that actually fit for a start." Helene's eyes swept over the silk costume still visible beneath the cloak, and her expression hardened. "Those vultures dressed you like a piece of meat. We'll fix that today." Meera's throat tightened. "I don't have any money. I can't pay for—" "You don't need money. You're under the king's protection." Helene's voice softened. "Eat something, child. You look like you haven't had a proper meal in months." She hadn't. The troop master kept them all thin, easier to control, he said, when they were hungry. Meera looked at the tray and saw fresh bread, butter, eggs, bacon, fruit. More food than she'd been allowed in a week. She ate until her stomach ached. Then she cried, which was embarrassing, but Helene just handed her a handkerchief and waited. "I don't understand why he's doing this," Meera said when she could speak again. "I'm nobody, a failed dancer, a merchant's daughter with no connections and no value. Why would a king—" "Because you're his mate." Helene said it like it was the simplest thing in the world. "I've served this castle for 30 years. I've watched him rule, watched him fight, watched him carry the weight of a kingdom without complaint. But I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looked at you last night." "How did he look at me?" "Like you were the answer to 400 years of loneliness." Helene began gathering the empty dishes. "He's not a gentleman, our king. Not soft. But he's fair, and he's honest, and he's been waiting for you longer than most people live. Give him a chance to prove himself. You might be surprised." She left Meera alone with the weight of those words. The day passed strangely. Seamstresses came to measure her for new clothes, real clothes with proper coverage and quality fabric. A bath was drawn, hot water and scented oils, the first proper bath she'd had since her father sold her. She scrubbed 6 months of shame from her skin and tried not to think about how easily it could all be taken away. It was evening when Kaelin returned. He knocked first, waited for her permission to enter, stood in the doorway like a supplicant rather than a king, his amber eyes searching her face for signs of fear. "May I come in?" he asked. She nodded, and he crossed to stand by the fire. He'd changed from the formal clothes of the previous night into something simpler, a dark tunic, leather trousers, his hair slightly disheveled. He looked less like a monster now, more like a man. "Helene tells me you've been reading," he said. "I hope that's allowed." "Everything in this room is yours, including the books." He turned to face her. "She also tells me you can do mathematics, accounting." Meera stiffened. "My father was a merchant. He taught me to keep his ledgers before he—" She stopped, swallowed. "Before? Before he sold you to pay his debts?" "Yes." Kaelin's expression darkened. "Where is he now? Your father?" "I don't know. I don't care." The bitterness in her voice surprised her. "He looked me in the eye and handed me over like I was cargo, told me I should be grateful he'd found someone willing to take me. Said it was better than debtor's prison. It wasn't. No. She wrapped her arms around herself. It wasn't. Silence stretched between them. The fire crackled. Somewhere in the castle, a clock chimed the hour. I have a proposition for you, Kaelin said finally. Meera tensed. Here it was. The catch. The price for the room and the food and the books. What kind of proposition? My steward is retiring next month. He's managed the castle accounts for 40 years, and I need someone to replace him. Kaelin's amber eyes held hers. Someone who can read ledgers, someone who understands numbers, someone who might appreciate being valued for her mind rather than her body. She stared at him. You want me to be your steward? I want you to consider it. You'd be paid, of course. A real salary, not the scraps they gave you at the troop. You'd have independence, respect, a position of actual importance. He paused. And you wouldn't owe me anything. This isn't a condition of staying. It's an opportunity, if you want it. Why would you trust me with your accounts? You don't know me. I know you were trained by a merchant before you could afford to be clumsy. I know you kept reading even when it was forbidden. I know you have a mind that was wasted on dance routines you never wanted to learn. He stepped closer, his voice dropping. And I know you're my mate, which means I trust you with far more than my accounts. Meera's heart was pounding. This was impossible. This was a dream. The kind she'd stopped letting herself have because hoping hurt too much. I'll think about it, she said. Kaelin smiled. It transformed his face from intimidating to almost gentle, and something in Meera's chest cracked open at the sight. Take all the time you need. He moved toward the door, then paused. Meera? Yes? I'm glad you're here. He said it quietly, like a confession. Whatever you decide about the position, about the mate bond, about any of it, I'm glad you're here. He left before she could respond. Meera stood in the firelight, wearing clothes that fit and surrounded by books she was allowed to read, and felt something she hadn't felt in 6 months. Hope. Terrifying, fragile, impossible hope. 3 weeks into her new life, Meera discovered that the Lycan king had a secret. He couldn't sleep. She found out by accident. She'd been working late in the study he'd given her, a real study, with a proper desk and quills and all the ledgers she could ever want, when she heard footsteps in the corridor. It was well past midnight, the castle silent except for the distant howl of wind against stone. She followed the sound without thinking. Down corridors she'd memorized, through doorways she now had permission to enter, until she found herself in the castle's great library. Kaelin sat in a chair by the dying fire, a book open in his lap that he clearly wasn't reading. His eyes were fixed on the flames, his expression distant and haunted. He looked older in that moment, tired in a way that had nothing to do with physical exhaustion. You should be asleep, he said, without turning around. So should you. I don't sleep much. He closed the book and set it aside. 400 years of memories make for crowded dreams. Meera hesitated in the doorway. She should leave, should give him privacy, should remember that he was a king and she was, what? A steward in training? A mate he'd claimed but never touched? A woman who still wasn't sure if any of this was real? Instead, she walked into the library and sat in the chair across from him. What do you dream about? She asked. Kaelin was quiet for a long moment. The firelight played across his features, softening the hard lines of his face. My brother, he said finally. The one I executed for treason. Meera's breath caught. She'd heard the story. Everyone had. The king's younger brother had attempted a coup, had tried to seize the throne through assassination and betrayal. The king had stopped him, had passed judgment himself, as was his right. "You didn't have a choice," she said carefully. "I had a choice." His voice was flat, empty. "I could have exiled him, could have imprisoned him, could have found some way to spare his life without compromising the kingdom." His hands clenched on the arms of his chair. "But I was angry. He'd killed people I loved. Trusted advisors, old friends, loyal soldiers. So I chose death. I chose to be the one who swung the sword." "That was 200 years ago." "Yes." He finally looked at her, and she saw the weight of centuries in his amber eyes. "And I still dream about the sound it made. Still wake up with his blood on my hands, even though I've washed them 1,000 times." Meera didn't know what to say. What could anyone say to that kind of grief? What words existed for a man who'd carried guilt for 2 centuries? "I dream about my father," she heard herself say. Kaelin went still. Not nightmares, exactly. Just memories. The way he used to praise me when I balanced the ledgers correctly. The way he'd ruffle my hair and call me his clever girl. Her voice cracked. "And then I wake up and remember that he sold me. That everything I thought I knew about him was a lie. That the man who raised me looked at his daughter and saw a way to clear his debts." "That wasn't your failure. It was his." "I know." She wrapped her arms around herself. "But it doesn't stop me from wondering what I did wrong, what I could have done differently, whether I was ever anything more to him than an asset to be liquidated." Kaelin stood. For a moment, she thought he was leaving, but he crossed to her chair instead, kneeling before her so their eyes were level. "You did nothing wrong," he said. "Nothing. Your father was a coward and a fool, and he threw away the most precious thing he had because he couldn't see its value." "I'm not precious." "You're extraordinary." His hand came up, hovering near her face the way it always did, asking permission without words. "May I?" She nodded. His palm cupped her cheek, warm and calloused. His thumb traced the line of her cheekbone with impossible gentleness. "I've watched you these past 3 weeks," he said. "Watched you devour every book in your chambers. Watched you reorganize my steward's records so efficiently that he wept with joy. Watched you argue with my advisors about grain tariffs and win." A smile ghosted across his face. "You have a mind like a blade, Meera. Sharp and precise and utterly wasted on anyone who couldn't appreciate it." "The troop master said I was worthless, said I couldn't even dance properly." "The troop master was an idiot." Kaelin's voice hardened. "He looked at you and saw a body to be sold. He never bothered to see the woman underneath, the one who reads economic treatises for fun and can calculate exchange rates in her head and has more intelligence in her smallest finger than he has in his entire being." Meera's eyes were stinging. She hadn't cried since that first morning with Helene, had promised herself she was done with tears. But something about the way he looked at her, like she was remarkable, like she mattered, like she was worth more than the sum of her failures, cracked something open in her chest. "I don't know how to be what you want," she whispered. "I don't know how to be a mate. I've never—" She stopped, swallowed. "The troop master, he didn't— he never let anyone—" "I know." Kaelin's thumb brushed away a tear she hadn't realized she'd shed. "I would have smelled it on you if he had. Would have killed him that first night instead of just buying your contract." "You would have killed him?" "Without hesitation." He said it calmly, like stating a simple fact. Anyone who touched you without your consent would die. That's not negotiable. She should have been frightened, should have remembered that he was a predator, ancient and powerful, capable of violence she couldn't imagine. But all she felt was safe. "I've never told anyone that," she said, "about what I was afraid they would do to me, about the nights I spent terrified that the troop master would decide I was worth more in someone's bed than on a stage. You never have to be afraid of that again." Kaelin's forehead came to rest against hers. "You are safe here, Meera. Whatever you need, whatever you want, whatever pace you require, I will wait. I've waited 400 years. I can wait as long as you need." They stayed like that for a long moment, foreheads touching, breathing the same air. Meera's heart was pounding so loud she was sure he could hear it. Sure he could sense the terrifying, impossible feeling taking root in her chest. "Kaelin?" His name felt strange on her tongue, intimate in a way she hadn't expected. "Yes? Why do you dream about your brother?" He pulled back slightly, his amber eyes searching her face. "Because I loved him. Because killing him was the right thing to do, and I still hate myself for it. Because 400 years isn't long enough to forget the look on his face when I—" He stopped, took a breath. "Because some wounds don't heal. They just become part of you." "Is that why you saved me? Because you couldn't save him?" The question was too blunt, too raw. But Kaelin didn't flinch. "Maybe," he said quietly. "Maybe part of me saw you in that hall and thought, here's someone I can protect. Here's someone I won't fail. But that's not why I claimed you." "Then why?" "Because you're mine." His hand slid from her cheek to cup the back of her neck, his fingers tangling in her hair. "Because I felt the bond snap into place the moment I saw you, and nothing has made sense since except the desperate, overwhelming need to make sure you're safe and happy and free to be whoever you want to be." "I don't know who I want to be." "Then we'll figure it out together." He smiled, and something in Meera's chest cracked wide open. "That's what mates do." She kissed him. It wasn't planned, wasn't calculated. One moment she was looking at his smile, and the next she was leaning forward, pressing her lips to his in a kiss that was clumsy and desperate and absolutely terrifying. He went still for a heartbeat. Then his arms came around her, pulling her from her chair into his lap, and he kissed her back. It was nothing like she'd expected. Nothing like the performances she'd been trained to give. This was real, warm and soft and achingly tender. He kissed her like she was precious, like she was valuable, like she was worth more than 5,000 gold, more than a kingdom, more than 400 years of waiting. When they finally broke apart, Meera was trembling. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I shouldn't have—" "Don't apologize." Kaelin's voice was rough. His amber eyes blazed with something that made her blood sing. "Don't ever apologize for that." "I don't know what I'm doing." "Neither do I." He pressed a kiss to her forehead. "We'll figure it out together." She stayed in his arms until the fire died to embers, and when she finally returned to her chambers, she didn't dream of her father at all. She dreamed of amber eyes and safety, and the terrifying possibility that she might actually be falling in love. Her father came on a Tuesday. Meera was in the treasury, reviewing the quarterly accounts with the retiring steward, when Helene appeared in the doorway with a face like thunder. "There's a man at the gates," she said. "Claims to be your father. Says he's come to take you home." The quill slipped from Meera's fingers. The numbers on the page blurred into meaningless shapes. For a moment, she was 22 again, standing in her father's study while he explained that she was being sold, that her entire life had been weighed against his debts and found wanting. "I don't have a home," she heard herself say. "Not with him." "I told the guards as much, but he's making a scene, demanding to speak with the king, claiming you were taken against your will." Helene's expression softened. "His Majesty is in a council meeting. I can have the man removed if you'd like." "No." Meera stood, her legs steadier than she'd expected. "I'll handle it myself." She found her father in the outer courtyard, flanked by 2 guards who looked thoroughly unimpressed with his demands. He'd aged in the 7 months since she'd seen him, his hair greyer, his face more lined, his clothes shabbier than she remembered. The merchant who'd once dressed in fine wool now wore patched linen. "Meera!" His face lit up when he saw her, and for one treacherous moment, her heart ached. "Thank the gods. I've been searching for you everywhere. When I heard you'd been taken by the Lycan king—" "Taken?" She stopped several feet away, arms crossed over her chest. "Is that what you're calling it?" "The troop master said some noble purchased your contract. I had no idea it was the king himself." He stepped toward her, hands outstretched. "But it doesn't matter now. I've come to bring you home. I've sorted out my debts, found new investors. Things are different now. We can be a family again." "A family." The word tasted like ash. "You sold me, father. You looked me in the eye and handed me over to a troop of entertainers like I was livestock. And now you want to be a family." "I had no choice. The creditors were threatening debtors' prison. I did what I had to do to survive." "You did what you had to do to survive." Meera's voice was ice. "And what about me? What about my survival? Did you think about what would happen to me in that troop? Did you care?" "Of course I cared. You're my daughter." "I was your daughter. Then I became your debt payment." She took a breath, steadying herself. "Why are you really here? It's not to take me home. You don't have a home. I can see that from your clothes. So what do you want?" Something shifted in his expression. The loving father mask slipped, revealing the desperate man underneath. "I heard rumors," he said, "that the king has taken a particular interest in you, that you're living in the castle, wearing fine clothes, managing his accounts." His eyes swept over her dress. Good wool, well made, worth more than anything he currently owned. "I thought perhaps you might help your old father. A loan, maybe. Or a word in the king's ear about trading contracts." There it was. The truth beneath the performance. He hadn't come to rescue her. He'd come to use her. "You sold me for 300 gold pieces," Meera said quietly. "And now you want me to help you?" "I'm your father. Family helps family. You stopped being my family the moment you signed my contract." She stepped back. "Leave. Now. And don't come back." "Meera, be reasonable. I'm sure the king would understand." "The king," said a voice like rolling thunder, "understands perfectly." Kaelan emerged from the castle doors, his amber eyes fixed on her father with an expression that made the older man stumble backward. He moved to Meera's side and placed a hand on the small of her back, grounding, protective, but not possessive, a reminder that she wasn't alone. "Your Majesty." Her father dropped into a clumsy bow. You were just leaving." Kaelan's voice held no warmth. "I heard everything. The guards will escort you to the border. If you're seen in my territory again, you'll be arrested for trespassing." "But she's my daughter. She's my mate." The words rang through the courtyard, absolute and undeniable. She's under my protection, and you lost any claim to her the moment you sold her like property. Her father's face went pale. Mate? But she's human. She's nobody. She can't possibly. She's everything. Kaelin's arm came around Meera's waist. She's brilliant and kind and stronger than anyone I've ever met. She's the best thing that's ever walked into my life, and I will spend every day I have proving myself worthy of her. Meera's throat tightened. She'd known he cared, known he wanted her. But hearing him say it like this, publicly, fiercely, with her father standing right there, cracked something open in her chest. "You can't do this," her father sputtered. "She's my blood. I have rights." "You have nothing." Kaelin's voice dropped to a growl. "You threw away your rights when you sold your own child. Now leave, before I decide to investigate exactly how legal that sale was. Debt bondage has been outlawed in my kingdom for 200 years. I wonder what a magistrate would make of your transaction." The colour drained from her father's face. He looked at Meera one last time. Not with love, she realized, but with calculation, trying to figure out if there was any angle left to exploit. "Go," Meera said. "I don't want to see you again." He went. The guards escorted him through the gates, and Meera watched until he disappeared from view. She waited for the grief to hit, the loss, the mourning for the father she'd thought she had. But all she felt was relief. "Meera." Kaelin's voice was soft now, meant only for her. "Are you all right?" "I think so." She turned to face him and found his amber eyes filled with concern. "I think I've been mourning him for 7 months already. There's nothing left to grieve. I'm sorry you had to see him again." "I'm not." She reached up and cupped his face in her hands, the first time she'd touched him without being asked. "I needed to know. Needed to see who he really was, without the rose-colored memories. Now I know." "What do you know?" "That he never deserved me." She rose up on her toes and pressed her forehead to his. "And that the man who does is standing right in front of me." Kaelin's breath caught. "Meera, I love you." The words came out easier than she'd expected. "I've been trying not to. Trying to protect myself from hoping too much, wanting too much. But I can't do it anymore. I love you, Kaelin. Not because you saved me. Not because you gave me books and a position and a place to belong. Because you see me. The real me. And you think I'm extraordinary. You are extraordinary. So are you." She smiled, and for the first time it didn't feel like a risk. "Claim me. Make me yours. I'm tired of being afraid of wanting things." "Are you sure?" His hands came up to cover hers, holding them against his face. "Once I mark you, there's no going back. You'll be bound to me forever." "Forever sounds perfect." He kissed her, deep and fierce and full of 400 years of loneliness, finally finding its end. Then his lips moved to her neck, to the pulse point where her blood beat strongest, and she felt the sharp press of his teeth. "Mine," he breathed. "Yours," she agreed. "Always." The bite was brief. The bond that followed was eternal, a warmth spreading through her veins, a connection that went deeper than blood or bone. She could feel him now, his love, his relief, his overwhelming joy. And underneath it all, the absolute certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. "I love you," Kaelin said against her skin. "I've loved you since the moment you stumbled into my great hall and looked at me like I was the most terrifying thing you'd ever seen." Meera laughed. You were terrifying. And now you're mine. She pulled back to look at him, at those amber eyes that had changed everything. And I'm never letting go. The wedding took place on the spring equinox, when the castle gardens were bursting with flowers and the air smelled of new beginnings. Meera stood before the great hall, the same hall where she'd stumbled through a dance she didn't know, where nobles had laughed at her clumsiness, where she'd met the amber eyes of a king and felt her world tilt sideways. The same hall, but nothing else was the same. She was wearing silk again, but this silk was white and gold, heavy with embroidery, designed to make her look like a queen rather than a commodity. A crown of silver and sapphires rested on her head. The claiming mark on her neck was visible to everyone, a badge of honor rather than a brand of ownership. And at the altar, watching her with eyes that burned like honey in sunlight, stood Kaelan. He looked different today, less like a monster, more like a man. His formal clothes couldn't quite contain the wildness of him, but there was a softness in his expression that she'd learned was reserved only for her. "You came," he said quietly as she reached him, an echo of words he'd spoken months ago, in a library where neither of them could sleep. "I'll always come," she replied. "You're stuck with me now." The ceremony was brief. Lycan traditions didn't require elaborate rituals, just the acknowledgement of the bond, the exchange of vows, the declaration before witnesses. But when Kaelan slid a ring onto her finger, gold set with amber stones the exact color of his eyes, Meera felt the weight of it settle into her bones. She was a queen now. The merchant's daughter, who'd been sold for 300 gold pieces, was now the most powerful woman in the kingdom. The feast that followed was grander than the one where they'd met. Nobles who had once laughed at her clumsiness now bowed when she passed, their eyes carefully respectful. Musicians who had played while she stumbled now played for her coronation. The same hall, the same faces, but a completely different world. "You're smiling," Kaelan murmured, pulling her close as they watched the celebrations from the high table. "What are you thinking about?" "The night we met. How terrified I was. How certain I was that nothing good could ever happen to someone like me. And now? Now I'm wondering how I got so lucky." She leaned into his warmth, feeling the bond pulse between them. "You could have let me stumble through that dance and never thought of me again. Why didn't you?" "Because my wolf wouldn't let me." His arm tightened around her waist. "The moment I saw you, everything else disappeared. The music, the dancers, the entire hall full of nobles, none of it mattered. Just you, just your eyes, looking at me like I was going to devour you." "I thought you were." "I was." His lips brushed her temple. "Just not in the way you expected." The celebration continued late into the night. Meera danced, properly this time, in Kaelan's arms, moving to music she actually knew. She laughed with Helene, who had tears in her eyes and kept calling her "my lady," in a voice thick with pride. She accepted congratulations from nobles who had once dismissed her as merchandise. And when the last guest had departed and the hall had finally emptied, Kaelan carried her to their chambers and showed her exactly what it meant to be loved by a wolf. 3 years later, Meera sat in her study, the same study she'd been given when she first became steward, reviewing reports from across the kingdom. The work had grown since then. She wasn't just managing castle accounts anymore. She was managing an entire economy, implementing reforms that her merchant training had prepared her for, proving every day that her value had never been in her body. A knock at the door interrupted her concentration. "Come in," she called, not looking up from her ledgers. "You work too hard." Kaelin's voice was warm with amusement. "Our daughter is asking for you. Apparently, bedtime stories from the king aren't sufficient anymore." Meera smiled and set down her quill. Their daughter, Elena, named for the grandmother Meera had never known, was 2 years old and already had her father wrapped around her tiny finger. "She has your stubbornness," Meera said, rising to meet him. "She has your intelligence." Kaelin pulled her into his arms, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "I received word from the border today. Your father tried to cross into the kingdom again." Meera's smile faded. "What did he want?" "Money, I assume. He's been telling anyone who'll listen that his daughter is queen, that he's owed compensation for his role in your success." Kaelin's jaw tightened. The guards turned him away. He's been banned from every territory in the Lycan alliance. Good. She felt nothing at the news. No grief, no anger, no lingering wish that things had been different. Just a quiet satisfaction that the man who'd sold her could now only watch from a distance as she thrived. There's more. Kaelin's expression shifted into something almost like satisfaction. "The troop master, the one who bought your contract, his operation was shut down last month. Turns out my investigation into his practices uncovered quite a bit of illegal activity. He's currently in prison, awaiting trial for debt bondage and human trafficking." Meera's breath caught. "You investigated him?" "I told you I would. It just took time to build a proper case." His amber eyes held hers. 12 women were freed from his troop. They've been offered positions in various households across the kingdom, if they want them. Real positions, real wages, real choices. Tears stung her eyes. She hadn't thought about the other dancers in months. The women she'd trained beside. The ones who had looked at her with irritation when she couldn't follow their choreography. She'd been so focused on her own survival that she'd forgotten they were surviving too. "Thank you," she whispered. "You don't need to thank me. Justice isn't a gift. It's a responsibility." He cupped her face in his hands, thumbs brushing away the tears that had escaped. "Every woman in that troop deserved better. You just happened to be the one I could save first." "You didn't just save me." Meera placed her hands over his. "You saw me. The real me. The scholar in the courtesan's costume. That's worth more than any rescue." "You would have saved yourself eventually. You're too stubborn to stay beaten." "Maybe," she smiled, "but I'm glad I didn't have to." They walked together to their daughter's chambers, where Eleanor was waiting with the imperious patience of a princess who knew she would always get her way. Meera settled onto the bed and gathered the child in her arms, feeling Kaelin settle beside them. "Tell me the story," Elena demanded. "About how Papa found you." "Again?" Meera laughed. "You've heard it 100 times. I want to hear it again." Meera looked at Kaelin, who was watching them with an expression of such profound love that it made her chest ache. 400 years of loneliness. And now this. A mate, a daughter, a family he'd never dared to hope for. "Once upon a time," Meera began, "there was a woman who was sent to entertain a court. She was scared and alone, and certain that nothing good would ever happen to her again. But then she met the Wolf King," Elena interrupted. "But then she met the Wolf King," Meera agreed. "And he looked at her and saw something precious, something worth keeping, something worth loving. And he growled at all the bad people." "He did growl at the bad people." Meera pressed a kiss to her daughter's hair. "He said, 'She leaves with me.' And he took her away from everyone who had ever hurt her, and he gave her books and numbers and a purpose. And they lived happily ever after." Meera looked at Kaelin again, at the amber eyes that had seen her true worth when everyone else saw a clumsy dancer, at the king who had waited 400 years for her and would wait 400 more if she asked. "Yes," she said softly. "They lived happily ever after." Elena fell asleep with a smile on her face. Meera and Kaelin stayed beside her for a long moment, watching the rise and fall of her small chest, marveling at the life they'd created together. "I love you," Kaelin murmured. "I love you too." Meera leaned into his warmth. "Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for letting me." She was sent to entertain the court. She'd left with the king, and she'd never stopped being grateful for the moment he'd growled those words and changed her life forever. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new tale of fated mates, fierce kings, and the women who capture their hearts. Until next time.